How's it going, AND Camp? This is Justin Gibney. As you know, I'm the president of the AND campaign, and this is another civic update where we are trying to raise civic literacy among Christians so that as we go out into the public square, we can engage in a more informed and effective manner. And let me tell you, Christian, it is so important, number one, that we engage, but that when we engage, we do so in an informed manner, that we know what we're talking about, that we understand the spirit of the day, and we understand the process. And I truly believe if we go out there uninformed as we engage, then we are being bad stewards. Because politics and the civic space give Christians an opportunity to advocate for their neighbor. I think that's part of the Great Commandment, to love our neighbor as ourselves. And if we're really going to love them as ourselves, that means we need to advocate for them as we would advocate for ourselves. If we're going to be about our Father's business, we need to do that in an informed manner and in a way that is worthy of the cause. And so I would urge everyone, I know you surf the net. We're all on the internet and social media all the time. Take the time once a week, twice a week, listen to the Civic Update, listen to the Church Politics Podcast to make sure that you are informed. I know you have a lot of other stuff to do. That's why we make this short and as sweet as possible, but it's important that you get involved. I want to talk today about the State of the Union address and also what's going on in Virginia among Democrats. It was a very tough week for Democrats, and I want to get into that a little bit as well. So on Tuesday night, as you know, the president gave the State of the Union address. Now, pursuant to the Constitution, he has to give Congress and the nation an update on the State of the Union. It doesn't necessarily have to be a speech, but he would in some way have to put forward that information so that everyone knew what he felt the State of the Union, he or she felt the State of the Union was. And so he did that on Tuesday night. This particular State of the Union was a very long State of the Union address. He was almost at an hour and a half, and he touched on a bit of everything from immigration and healthcare to infrastructure, economics, obviously foreign affairs. He covered a lot of ground, and depending on who you ask, some would say he did a really good job. Some would say not such a good job. You know how that goes. My personal opinion is, compared to a lot of the speeches that he's given in the past, this was probably one of his better ones. That said, I think some of his transitions were really rough. It almost seems like he needed to restructure what he was talking about because the topics that he was talking about, the order of them just seemed a little off, and it made for tough transitions. Maybe it was just a matter of more practice. But I thought there's some rough transitions, but there were some bright spots as well, and you saw Democrats respond to those. Now, something else that happened in the chamber during the State of the Union was that a lot of the women in Congress wore white. This was in part in remembrance of the suffragettes, that suffragette movement, but also it was to kind of recognize the fact that there were more women in Congress than ever before. And so that's a big deal, and they wanted to point that out. Something I always watch, and if you watched it, you may have noticed too, it's always interesting to see what the opposition party, so to speak, stands up for and what they keep their seat on. So the president's party, the Republicans, are going to stand up every time he makes a major point. They're going to stand up and clap. But you often see these awkward moments where the Democrats, the opposition party, are kind of like looking around like, are we supposed to clap for this one, or are we going to stay seated? So that's always something interesting to watch. And it says a lot about where there may be opportunities for bipartisanship and places that you can work together. The president started off talking about bipartisanship. His whole message wasn't bipartisan, and I think that was very clear to a lot of people. But as expected, one of the primary topics that he touched on and spent time on was immigration, specifically the wall and border security. As you know, this was the reason that we had the shutdown, was because they could not see eye to eye when it came to this border security. And I don't know what's going to happen, but they need to figure something out by February 15th. Many would say they need to actually have a bill and an agreement by Friday in order to prevent another shutdown. So let's hope they figure something out. It would be great, and I've said this over and over ad nauseum, that they really just need comprehensive health care, right? I mean, that comprehensive immigration reform. Comprehensive immigration reform is really what they need, given that 2020 is coming up, given the dynamics and what both bases are asking for. it's tough to see that happening. It's tough to see anything that would be comprehensive come into play. At best, and something I've suggested is you can give some money for border security, not just a wall, even though everybody that has been there before has voted on money for fencing. But to give border security money, but also secure DACA, secure those dreamers so that they know what's going on, and hopefully they can get to that. But it's hard to say what's actually going to happen. One of the options that the president is saying that he has on the table is actually claiming that this is an emergency and actually using emergency funds to kind of bypass Congress to do it himself. I think that would be a terrible idea. I think it would set a terrible precedent, because any president who got in there would say, hey, this is such a serious issue, I can just say it's an emergency and I don't need Congress for that. That is not how our system is set up. We have checks and balances for a reason. I do not think the president should go that route. But we'll see what happens once they kind of force his hand. We'll see what direction he decides to go in. On a positive note, it was good to see the president talk about infrastructure and trying to get a bipartisan deal when it comes to infrastructure. So just so you know, infrastructure is like the skeleton of the nation, right? It's your roads, it's your bridges. You also have water infrastructure, so it's your pipes. And you would be amazed how bad of shape our infrastructure is in. America's infrastructure, our bridges, all that stuff is in really bad shape, and it's a safety hazard. Now, this is really a safety concern. Some of you who've heard me speak before know that here in Atlanta, that I've run several campaigns to raise funds to fix the infrastructure here in Atlanta. So I know quite a bit about infrastructure. But you can build pretty buildings, you can build your city up. But if your infrastructure, if your skeleton is not where it needs to be, all that can be for naught and really crumble along with whatever else is going on. So hopefully they can get something done with infrastructure. It's still hard to see with everything that's going on and how dynamic 2020 is going to be. It's hard to see them getting something really big done, even on that. But I'm going to keep hope alive and just hope that some folks are trying to do the right thing and not just posturing for the next election. And that's unfortunately the reality of what happens oftentimes. The other thing that we can talk about is what's going on in Virginia right now. As you know, the governor Northam was in his yearbook for medical school. Who even knew they had yearbooks for medical school? He was in blackface. He was either in blackface or he was in a Ku Klux Klan suit. Initially, he came out and apologized, and then he came back the next day and said that it wasn't him. It actually wasn't him. You know, once you've apologized for something, it's pretty much too late. So he's holding on. A lot of serious Democrats and Democratic leaders in Virginia have asked him to step down. He hasn't done it yet, but we'll just have to see how that goes. So once people expected him to resign, next you look at Justin Fairfax, who was the lieutenant governor who would have became the governor. And so people were looking at him like, hey, get ready to be the governor. As soon as that happened, he gets hit with sexual assault allegations. I think they came from the Democratic National Convention in 2004. And so now people are wondering, is he going to resign? What's going to happen with him? Democrats have been a lot more silent on that issue than they had with Northam. They haven't really spoken out on it. After you talk about that, then you go down to the Attorney General, who also admitted to being in blackface a time before. So now you have the top three Democrats, the top three people in government in Virginia with very serious issues. Now, the issue for the Democratic Party is they set this standard. They set some standards on both of these issues when it comes to race issues that people should just step down once they're found in that type of compromising situation, and also without due process that people who are accused of sexual assault really have been asked to step down. On the other side, you have Republicans who have asked for due process, and now you're seeing them switch positions. The Democrats, some may want due process now, and the Republicans are saying, no, you set these rules, so you live by them. I think this is the place where you need to have integrity, and you need to say, hey, this is the right standard. Due process is always important, and let the people decide whether or not these folks should stay or not. But people need to be heard out. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if they end up stepping down. Thank you for joining us. Again, Church Politics Podcast will be back next week. So we hope that you'll be listening in. Take care.